Stranded: Alien Dawn is basically RimWorld in 3D. I'm sure that's been said before me, but it really truly is, and of course that's not a bad thing. Keeping groups of survivors alive on alien worlds is always fun, and this is no different. But of course survival isn't always easy, so I'm here to give you a complete beginner's guide on how to keep your survivors thriving instead of just surviving. So as soon as your game starts, your survivors need to get to work setting up their base camp to give them a fighting chance at survival. Pretty much every game you'll want to immediately set up some shelter and place some sleeping spots to give them somewhere to rest at night that's not too exposed. Alongside this, you'll also want a campfire to stay warm at night and cook some basic food. And you should also start some sort of storage area to keep your resources nearby to your camp for quicker crafting. To gather the wood, sticks and scrap needed to build these structures, you can order your survivors to chop down trees and bushes as well as designate wreckage to be scavenged. Scavenging can grant you many items and resources beyond just scrap metal, so keep an eye on what you find to make use of anything special. You should also take note of what your survivors are each good at. If you selected them at the start of the game, you should be familiar, but if not, take a look at their skills page, see what tasks they will perform best, and be happier performing. Use this info alongside the activities menu to prioritize which people are performing which tasks to keep things moving forward as well as they can be. You should turn on advanced priorities, give yourself finer control. Yeah, it looks like a lot of work and it is a little bit fiddly, but once it's set up, you never have to worry about it again. Just make sure someone will perform each task, otherwise you're going to be waiting an age for it to be completed if it's everyone's bottom priority. Once you're stable, you should start moving towards science, and the first step in this is the research table. This will allow your survivors to unlock new items to build and craft to make their survival a lot easier and more comfortable. Some good starting techs are construction basics, which will allow you to build actual buildings, weaponsmithing, and believe it or not, lightning rods. You don't need them all the time, but when you do need them, they're great to have. Anyway, while research is chugging away, you can also start to explore science in another way, and that is via observation. Pretty much every bit of flora and fauna you click on can be observed, and once completed, one of two options will be available to you. For flora, you'll be able to build farms and plant the crop you just observed. And for fauna, if applicable, you'll be able to attempt to tame the creature, but this does require their preferred food and research, so don't worry if this isn't available immediately. Taming is also a little bit of a resource sink for the most part, so I wouldn't focus on it till later. You should also be careful which creatures you order your survivors to observe, as not all of them are so passive. There's quite a variety of creatures in all shapes and sizes, but as a good rule of thumb, anything that looks like a giant insect generally doesn't really like you, so exercise caution when approaching, or just leave them for later if you want, since, like I said, taming is not an early activity. Of course, just because you don't interact with the creatures doesn't mean they don't want to come investigate or even attack you, so you'd also better be ready to defend your new home. Early on, you'll start getting alerted to groups of aggressive creatures gathering nearby. At this stage, they'll attack any survivor on site, but keep to themselves aside from this. But before too long, they'll launch an attack on your base. Once they do, you'll need to defend yourself to stay alive. When scavenging debris, you can find more advanced weapons like laser pistols, railguns, and laser pikes. But if you have no such luck or want to play it more primitive, research and weaponsmithing will unlock basic weapons at the crafting bench like spears, bows, and crossbows. You'll need to draft your armed survivors whenever there's an attack to directly order them into position to defend, and I'd spread them out to prevent them all getting sucked into melee if enemies get near, since ranged is of course much safer. This will serve you fine early on, but against later, more intense attacks, you're going to want something with a bit more heft and less risk to your troops. Basic defenses like fences allow you to fire over them whilst keeping enemies out, but they're not very tough to break through. Fortifications like wood pole walls are much tougher but can't be shot over without towers, making it a lot harder to get off safe damage. That being said, enemies will always take the easiest path into your base, so any open gates are very enticing to them, allowing you to funnel them exactly where you want them to go. In these high traffic areas you can place traps, like the early bear trap, which keeps enemies still, allowing your guys to get off easy shots. Later on you can unlock flamethrowers and mines which can damage enemies in their area of effect, or turrets that will shoot anything detected in their field of view when working in tandem with motion sensors. None of these traps will trigger when your survivors or tamed animals walk through them, but make sure to keep the hot zone clear when under attack, as they can still hit your guys if they're in the line of fire when they go off. As you go further down the tech tree, you'll unlock more advanced weapons and armor to spec your guys out for combat, and defend yourself easier with powerful turrets and tougher walls made from hardier materials. So now your survivors are safe and, well, surviving, it's time to start taking a look at their other wants and needs, since there's more to keeping a happy camp than just being alive. All survivors have these same basic needs of food, sleep, and entertainment, and you need to keep them mentally healthy as well as physically. Let's go through these one by one to keep things simple. Food of course means they need to eat, and this can be anything from rations found when scavenging to chef quality meals prepared using multiple advanced ingredients. The better the meal, the happier they will be, and often the more it will replenish their hunger, meaning they're fuller for longer. Sleep of course means they need somewhere to sleep, so a sleeping spot early on and a bed later. They can be disturbed when sleeping if people are moving near them or loud machines are working. Early on, having a shared sleeping space is fine, but once you can, it's better to have individual bedrooms to keep people happy and make sure they're getting the best rest that they can be. Entertainment comes in many forms, but some early options are punching poles, dartboards, and shooting targets. Just build them and people will use them when they have free time. Which reminds me, you can set schedules for your group from the manage menu, and this will decide at what times they're allowed to do what activity. By default, it's work for 14 hours, then free for 10, but you can change this so people sleep at specific times and have midday breaks or relaxation before bed, or even put some people on a night shift to keep things moving even when the sun isn't up. Whatever you do, just make sure people have got time to do what they enjoy as well as get work done, otherwise they're going to get pretty cranky. That's where the mental health comes in. Everyone has a list of troubles and pleasures, and these dictate their happiness. Pleasures can be things such as enjoying a nice meal, sleeping well, enjoying the entertainment options, and much more. Troubles are things such as disturbed sleep, low quality food, or having no free time and too much work. If the troubles outweigh the pleasures, their happiness will fall and push them towards a mental break. These can take many forms, from eating binges to going berserk, attacking everyone and everything in sight, or even hiding to avoid everyone. When they happen, you can either let them end normally, or have other survivors knock them out and put them into bed to cool off. But this can result in injury and long-term worse mental health, so only do this if you really need to. And speaking of injury, we have physical health. This one is super straightforward and really is exactly what you think. It's how physically healthy people are, so if they have any illnesses or injuries plaguing them. Injuries are of course caused by being attacked and taking damage from various sources. These are normally treated with first aid kits, and over time survivors get back to 100%. More serious injuries can cause survivors to faint, and they will then need to be rescued and put into bed so that they can be treated back to full health. Illnesses are a little bit harder to nail down since they can come from the weather, other survivors, creatures, or even events in the world. Sometimes they disappear on their own, but other times they can get worse, like the common cold evolving into pneumonia. When this happens, you'll need antibiotics to treat the symptoms and give your people a better chance of survival. These are quite a late game item, so make sure to work towards them in the research tree whenever possible. Alongside the weather causing illnesses, you'll also need to worry about keeping your people within their comfortable temperature range, and this can be changed via their clothing. Lighter clothing makes them happier in warm weather, whereas heavier clothing is of course better in cold. It's a good idea to have sets of both in storage for every one of your people to ensure they always have something to wear for every season. You'll also need to manually tell them to switch clothes, they won't automatically do it if they're too warm or too cold. Clothes also degrade over time, so having replacements waiting is never a bad thing. Alongside clothing, you can also manipulate the temperature of any buildings you have with various heating and cooling items. Windows are great early on for keeping buildings cool in the summer and keeping in the heat during the winter, and vents help keep indoor temperatures equalized, but you'll quickly need more to keep people comfortable. Fuel burning options like furnaces or stoves work okay for a time, but keeping up with the fuel demand can quickly become a time-consuming task, and plus you can't burn to cool people down. Electrical options are more expensive materials-wise, but are much low maintenance as long as you have a healthy network, and they can also be a lot more granular with their control. From pretty early on, you can set up a power network and you have quite a selection of generators to choose from. Diesel gens are the easiest to get started with, requiring scrap metal and fuel to get going, and will provide steady power as long as they have fuel. Solar panels and wind turbines are more sustainable as they don't consume anything once built outside of maintenance, but they do rely on forces outside of your control like the sun and wind, so are not as reliable. Batteries are the key to this, as you can store excess energy to then be used once production is down or consumption is up. I use solar and wind for my main generation, and then have some diesel gens as backup, but I don't want to have to manually switch on my gens when I'm running low, and that's where circuits come in. Building a low battery sensor allows me to send out a signal when my power reserves fall below a certain threshold. By setting my diesel gens to be on the same network as this, they will automatically switch on when I'm running low on power to give me the added boost that I need. Circuits can be used for so much more though. You can build thermostats that detect when temperature is above or below a certain level and switch on your heating and cooling machines. You can use a day-night sensor to automatically switch lights on and off during the day and night. You can use motion sensors with turrets to tell them to power on and shoot at anything detected in the area. I mean, it can even be something as simple as having a bomb that turns on and off a group of devices to save your people repeating the same action over and over. Circuits aren't all that necessary, but using them massively increases efficiency by eliminating wasted energy and repetitive tasks that are slowing down your progress. And the last little thing you need to know about is exploration. This is done via the hot air balloon, where you basically just send off a survivor to a landmark where they can encounter various events which require you to make decisions on how to proceed. Take caution, as the wrong answer can lead to injury or even death, just as easily as it can lead to riches. Different landmarks can appear over the course of the game, giving you new places to explore and find resources off the map, so keep an eye out for anything that sounds interesting. Resources like scrap, stone, and ores are finite in your landing zone, so exploring can be a handy way to get access to more, but it can end up being a bit luck-based, so frustrating if you don't get what you need. Just keep trying and use context to help you guess what you might find in a certain area. You can also send survivors to do the general explore option, which will discover new places to go on future runs, giving you even more options. Exploration is honestly pretty simple. Just select someone who is a good all-rounder, and they'll probably come back with something useful most of the time. And that's just about everything you need to get started in Stranded Alien Dawn. Like, subscribe, and if you're wishing you were instead managing an entire galaxy instead of just one colony, then check out this video on how to start every single game of Stellaris.